The pages of Action Comics are really, I think, trying with a commendable effort to deal with some moral ambiguity, some moral complexity, but it's falling a bit short. I think there's a couple of things maybe they didn't consider, but we'll dig into it in just a second. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics usually 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything I talk about. That's your first and only warning. This is another week of catch-up. After the holiday break, I think I'm finally now going to be caught up, even though next week there will not be an Essential Issues Weekly because I need to take time all week to work on some long-term projects I've got brewing in the background. So it'll be in 2 weeks, another week of catching up on 2 weeks of comics. But for now, we're going to look at the stuff released to the Ultra tier on January 7th and January 14th, starting with releases from the 7th. First of those, Action Comics 1093, and this is continuing the story arc of the early years of Clark Kent, where he is Superboy, and he's getting a costume together. He's figuring out how to be a superhero, and as I mentioned, talking about the last issue of Action Comics, I enjoy him learning that it can be complicated to be a superhero and to factor in all the things the complexities of situations that he needs to consider. And certainly that is the case here, as a corrupt businessman who's taken over management of the local bank in Smallville has basically used his power to falsely accuse all the citizens in Smallville of not making payments on their loans for months, and so the bank is foreclosing. All these farmers are going to lose their houses. They all know this is wrong. The bank dude is just calling it an error, but he's like, you're still going to have to vacate your homes while we sort this out. Well, the problem is they're all farmers, and so if in the time that they're vacating their properties, their crops are going to die, their animals are going to die, and as a result, they will just lose all of their money. They have to keep sustaining those things, or it all falls apart in a very short period of time. And so that's what this bank guy knows, and he's got evil plans to get away with it and stuff, but Superboy is in a difficult position because they can't prove this at the moment, and yet the farms are going to fail, including the Kent farm. So what is he going to do about it? Well, he goes to an abandoned gold mine, comes back with big chunks of pure gold, says to his parents, to Ma and Pa Kent, remember that abandoned gold mine we saw on vacation? Turns out if I dig deep enough, and Pa immediately is like, no. And Clark's like, I didn't steal it. It was right there, which now I have to pause and question whether or not this abandoned gold mine would really not literally belong to anyone. I didn't look into the laws, United States laws on this, but my guess is that at the very least, mineral rights belong to somebody. That property didn't just fall into the public domain, it's an abandoned mine. And so this probably is technically stealing, but the Pa doesn't call him out on that. That's not the reason that he gives for saying this is wrong, we can't do this to save the farm. Pa says, Clark, I need you to listen to me. I know things look dark, but that's no excuse for you using your powers for personal gain. Okay, so I can understand that, but what's interesting is never in this scenario does Clark say, I'm going to save the whole town this way. Now, I can agree that Clark morally should not just have it out for himself and just the people in his immediate proximity, that those are the only people that he cares about, that he should have an eye for loving everyone, as we all should. We are called to love our neighbor, whoever that is around us. But he does seemingly have a focus just on the Kent farm. Pa says, you benefit. And Clark's like, it's to save our home. And Ma Kent does seem to consider the gold for a moment, but she says, no, you mean well, but your Pa and I have discussed this. She says, you weren't given your abilities so you could take the easy way out. You have a higher calling. I truly believe that. And I wish she would have elaborated on that, because I don't think that we can merely assume that the more difficult path is the morally correct one. But that seems almost to be the implication. She explains, Clark, when we were young, I watched your father wring 50 acres of fertile land out of rock and mud. No man ever worked harder, and no man ever had more to show for it. That work helped make him the man he is today. Okay, well then encourage Clark to fix this because it's easy, and then expend energy in other ways to help other people, to continue working hard but help even more people than just the Kents. That seems to me, if it's about work ethic, then he can save the Kent farm with this gold, assuming there's not a mineral rights issue, and still be held to the value of a strong work ethic. Pa jumps in and says, but having principles is more important than any farm. It's our job to teach you to not get used to shortcuts. He says, why not? He answers, because we don't know where your powers come from. Suppose they go away someday. What then? Okay, so that's a very good point. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, so let's take a moment and enter into the exercise of puzzling through how would we solve this problem if Clark couldn't provide this fix. Provide the fix, though, Clark, and then, hey, we can use the time that after you've saved the Kent farm, and presumably, again, I would add all the other farms in Smallville by doing something similar with gold not tied to mineral rights somewhere else, everywhere else in the world. I mean, he could solve this. I mean, for that matter, and this idea is never brought up, if the issue is concerned that the various farms in Smallville will just is it fall fallow? Is that the word? I don't know. They'll just die because they're not cared for. The animals, the crops aren't cared for. Okay, Clark is a farm boy, and they could just assume that Superboy just knows cool things. But Superboy could just say, "Okay, you guys just go find a place to stay with family. I'm going to take care of everybody's farms." And he could totally do it. But that idea is never presented either. Now, what they come up with, it is a clever fix. I enjoyed how it ended. It took some ingenuity, some thinking for Clark to pull it off. But there was still just a bit lacking in terms of the moral nuance of this situation and how they were thinking about it. Anyway, that's Action Comics 1093. Despite all the nits I picked, I really enjoyed reading it, and I am really more and more enjoying this story arc in Action Comics about the early years of Clark learning how to be a superhero. I don't have much to say about Batman and Robin 28, although I am still enjoying it. It's this story featuring the Quiet Man, discovering his origins and things like that. And in the background is, what is his name? Albert Wesker? I can't remember the first name if I've got that right for sure. But the ventriloquist who puppeteers the gangster wooden doll Scarface, who has been reformed, but this mysterious villain, the Quiet Man, has it out for the ventriloquist or Scarface or maybe Wesker, and there's a really cool turn regarding Wesker the ventriloquist at the end of this that as we knew would eventually have to be the case, indicates no, he's not healthy, he's not cured, even though that was kind of the premise of this story, is that he's a victim in all of this because he was given a clean bill of health and released and has been like in protective custody and learning how to reintegrate with society, that kind of thing. But this issue, there's a reveal that turns all of that on its head. I won't completely spoil it, even though I've done about half of that already. But I really find the character of Scarface, of ventriloquist, fascinating, and ever since I was introduced to him in the Batman animated series, I just felt like many of Batman's villains, but especially with the ventriloquist, what a tragic character. This man who truly is not aware that he is puppeteering this evil villain, and he is this weak, whimpering, vulnerable person that's being taken advantage of by Well, ultimately, by he's a victim of this mental illness that he's experiencing. So, just a fascinating villain that I've always wished was featured more in comics, and I'm interested to see where things will go after this. If the ventriloquist, if Scarface will become a more prominent villain in Batman stories, I would really like that. But anyway, that's Batman and Robin 28. Then in the pages of Green Lantern Corps number 11, they're continuing to play around with these ideas of AI and personhood, and could AI ever become persons? And I think I'm content with where they seem to be landing on things for the most part. Now you've got Aya, right? She is the android or the AI that was given or built herself a robotic body, but she's sort of powered by green energy, and ever since that absolute power Amazo android gained sentience as a result of its connection to the star heart, I've been a little bit open, at least in the realm of fiction, to the idea that a being could potentially gain sentience if their very nature is will, you know? So yeah, I can go with it a little bit more in that context. But anyway, she's got a question at one point of whether or not she has a soul. And the reason it comes up is because she's part of a group of novice Green Lanterns being trained, and one of the tricks that they're learning is how they can project themselves using their ring by kind of going into a meditative state, and then an energy version of themselves can travel light years away and be controlled by their consciousness. They can see through this energy recreation of themselves. And so it's basically, as Kilowog says, it's a reconnaissance skill. And man, I hadn't seen this used in comics since like some comics from the 80s that I collected when I was in college. And so it's kind of neat to see a revival of this, a recognition of this old concept. But the other trainee Green Lanterns are able to do this, while Aya at first cannot. She says, maybe I do not have this ability because I do not have a soul. That's something she's been wondering and wrestling with. Kilowog says, nonsense, Aya. Just focus on the thing that gives you purpose. Purpose is tied to the soul. So eventually she has some kind of a connection to her purpose. She's able to create this projection of herself, which would seem to indicate, yes, she does in fact have a soul. So what is this purpose? I mean, first off, it's an interesting idea that like sentience is tied to purpose. Is that your own sense of purpose, or is that your objective purpose that you have been given? I mean, for purpose to be objective, it needs to have an overall purposer. That would be why, as Christians, we would believe that we have objective purpose rather than just proximate purpose, proximate relative purpose that we generate for ourselves, which actually doesn't have any absolute ground to it. In any case, that's a different philosophical issue, but I thought that was an interesting note. I wish they would have explored that a little bit more. I don't think they will. But, so what is Aya's purpose? Well, Razor, the Red Lantern that she loves, is in deep, deep trouble, and it's at that moment, out of concern for him, she's able to create the construct of herself and go and make sure that he's okay. She says, my love, as she comes to him, I think it is my soul. I was not sure I had one until I heard your scream, and in an instant, it leaped out of my body to find you, my purpose. So he, Razor, her love interest, is her purpose. And I think they sealed the deal by giving us a silent panel of them kissing in a loving romantic embrace. Now, this is a sweet romantic moment, and I can appreciate it for that. But oh my gosh, it is devastating to find our sense of purpose in someone else, even someone that we love very deeply. As much as I love my wife, I am committed to her for the rest of my life, as long as we both shall live. Same thing for my boys. They are not my purpose. What happens if they die? Or what happens in a romantic relationship like this one if it doesn't work out? If the relationship is disconnected for whatever reason, then you are purposeless. Now, if we're talking in relative terms and she's just assigning her own purpose to herself, then she can potentially assign another purpose to herself. What is that based on? Ultimately, it's based on a strong desire of oneself. But man, we run into all kinds of problems, not to mention it doesn't have objective grounding. We run into all kinds of problems when we decide our purpose just based on the strong feelings that we are pulled to. And there are people in life who are shattered and never recover because they found their sense of purpose, which really, purpose gets down to your identity, your reason for being. If a relationship with some person is your reason for being, and then that relationship ends, you can imagine the dark places that goes to and where it ends, tragically, for some people. Instead, as believers, we discover in Scripture that we're made in the image of God. We are loved by Him so much that He lived as one of us, died for us to be in relationship with Him forever. We have amazing cosmic purpose that is actually tied to the highest and greatest good, God Himself. So that is a much healthier place to find, and an objective place to find our sense of grounding. Yes, we arrive at that because of our subjective exploration of those things, but philosophically it has objective grounding where these other things do not. Well, as a nerdy Green Lantern fan side note, it was neat to see Effigy kind of be remembered and revived as a villain, and a kind of a tragic villain, but oddly enough, not going up against Kyle Rayner, the Green Lantern he was created to be a villain for, as at that time kind of an experimental replacement, I think, for Sinestro. But fans, I don't think, quite liked him as much. Then Nero came along later, but Effigy was the first attempt at kind of like an evil opposite to Kyle Rayner's Green Lantern. Well, he has been revived. He's been freed from the prison that he was kept in and is causing trouble for John. Has a little bit of a tragic vibe to him. There's some other power or being that is manipulating him, and so I'm interested to see where they're going to go with Effigy. I always thought he was kind of a cool looking villain and conceptually interesting, as well as a creation not of the Guardians of the Universe like the Green Lanterns were, but as a creation of the Controllers, which are an off-branch of the Malthusian race that both the Guardians and the Controllers and the, what are they called? The Zamorans, all of them are descended from the Malthusian race. Anyway, okay, I'm getting super nerdy there. Neat to see Effigy back. Well, the reason Effigy at least was brought back for this issue was to seemingly kill Ellie, which again is the reconstituted memories or a version of Ellie based on John Stewart's memories that seems to have her personality. Doesn't really have her memories, but has her personality insofar as John thinks of her. And he's been kind of like back and forth a bit as handled by different writers as to how he's thinking of her. And more recently, he's been saying, he's been coming to the place of not seeing her as his sister, but at the same time, she's been written in a way, as I observed in the last installment of Essential Issues, to get readers, I think, to care about her and to value her as a person. So who are we to side with? Are we to side with John, who seems to not view her as his sister, or with the sense that the writers are trying to give us that she is a person worth us as readers investing in and caring about? Well, we found this point of compromise. John's ring says some Blue Lanterns have exhibited the ability to heal great injuries, but I'm not sure it's been displayed on this scale because Ellie just did this really cool thing that kind of revived herself through the power of hope. And then the ring, still using John's mom's personality, but he's definitely clear on, like, you're not my mom, says, John, your sister is special. He says, she's not my sister, ... And then in the next panel says, but I'm done pretending she's not family. So that's interesting. it seems to me that what we are to take from this, and I am much more content with this kind of scenario, is that whatever Ellie, quote unquote, is, she being constituted of pure will in some sense, seems to have personhood, seems to have true sentience, but at the same time is not Ellie, doesn't even have her memories, just is a representation of her based on John's memories of his sister Ellie, who passed away years and years ago. So in that sense, she is kind of born of John, or the ideas that John has her own sentience, so she is a person, but she's not Ellie. So where does he land in categorizing her? Well, that's undefined, but he's willing to say she's not family. Or that she is family, excuse me. So, I think I can roll with that, and I'm still very interested in what is going to become of this character. I'm wondering, because of this issue playing around with the idea of soul projections that Green Lanterns can do, are we going to find out at some point that Ellie is the kind of soul projection that just maintained, or like part of his soul or something, of the other John? Remember I mentioned last time that John Stewart, much like John Crichton in Farscape, was twinned, if you will, split in two, neither being the copy or the original. They're both kind of the original, both equal, but there's just two of them. Well, the one that created Ellie died, and this John is still alive. Is this some surviving aspect of, are we going to find out eventually, of the other John's soul? Is she a partial projection of his soul? I don't know where they're going to go conceptually, but I couldn't help but consider that as a possibility, as they are playing with her personhood and also reminding us of Green Lantern's soul projection in this issue. So anyway, that's Green Lantern Corps number 11. Now getting out of books released on the Ultra Tier on the 7th, we're into the books released on the 14th of January, and I'm just going to make some brief comments. First up, DCKO number 3. I'm continuing to really not like the main book. I'm preferring, I'm noticing the tie-ins more. This one, it just doesn't seem to have consistency with other elements of DC continuity. Red Kryptonite is treated in this issue as like only and always making Kryptonians rage. But unless that's a very recent retcon and change to the continuity, I've always known Red Kryptonite as having very strange and random effects that cannot be predicted on Kryptonians, and it never affects them the same way twice. It's always a little bit varied. Now, I know that in the Smallville TV series, it always kind of made Clark bad or something, right? I didn't watch the show. But anyway, I'm just like, what is this? Also, there's oversimplifications of how heroes' powers are used. Cyborg is able to basically make Connor Hawk, Green Arrow, equal with him in strength by just kind of like splooshing over to him nanites, and then using those nanites to draw from Connor all of his martial arts skills. So they are both equal combatants working together, and I'm like, why have you not done this before? Why do you not just take 10 minutes and upgrade every Teen Titan member with nanites, and while you're at it, Connor Hawk's world-class martial arts skills? It's just too easy, and it's never been done before. It just seems to, we're just playing around with action figures. That's really what this feels like. There is also, as I suspected would be the case, a complete disregard for Aquaman's water powers. I mean, the way that he defeated Hawkman totally put on this, and admittedly, that was written by Jeremy Adams, who in his Aquaman run has been exploring all this stuff. But it seems to me DC editorial should be on top of this, so that those powers, especially at the level they were displayed in that tie-in a couple weeks ago, that there should be consistency here. But instead, Aquaman is just soundly defeated by actually, I would argue, a much less powerful enemy in Supergirl, who's kind of made extra large and kind of angry, I guess. But the power level that Hawkman was playing at, with Nth Metal in play and all kinds of cosmic stuff going on, and Aquaman still able to defeat him, this version of Supergirl, roided out, angry, and supersized, was, in my mind, not justifiably more powerful than the most powerful version of Hawkman that Aquaman took out in the one-shot devoted to that bout, written by Jeremy Adams. And so I'm not like, I don't know, I'm not surprised, so I didn't have my hopes up. I've really just more and more been detached from the main entries of the DCKO series, and that's why, in a nutshell, there just doesn't seem to be an interest in thoughtfully playing out these bouts. Instead, it's just we're going whatever weird idea we can think of, regardless of how well it sits in the rest of DC continuity. So that's DCKO number 3, and then finally, Wonder Woman number 28. Now, I have been really checking out of this, just the writing style of Tom King on this book in particular has just progressively not been working for me. I think there's just a little bit too much that's odd and left to interpretation, and also seemingly a version of feminism, and I don't think I'm reading into this too much. I probably am in some ways reading into it a little too much, but I don't think I'm overstepping too far here. There's certainly feminist themes. I think it would be crazy to try and deny that. But it's going so far as to make Wonder Woman like kind of untouchable, and she can, well, I don't want to say she can never be wrong, because she has been wrong. She's admitted that. But there's still scenes where clearly it seems to me that she's written to just have dominance in a situation, to the point where I'm like, are you, Wonder Woman, becoming actually the thing that you hate? Are you actually treating men, is this a revenge fantasy? Is this a feminist revenge fantasy in some ways? Every once in a while there's scenes that kind of play that way a bit to me. And I think there's just some missteps philosophically in this book in a number of ways. And so mostly I'm just tuning in to kind of see what happens, what status quo changes are there. She's a mother now, after all, taking her baby around in a backpack. I do think that lends itself to a ton of interesting storytelling and character development for Wonder Woman in the future. I think that has tremendous potential. I'm not really seeing it yet, but I'm hoping that we will, and in the hands of another writer would be my preference at this point, even though there's some Tom King stuff that I've really enjoyed in the past. This series has not been among those. So she saved the day, right? And she saved this group of people that were led by a horrible dictator. And this little girl that's kind of been representative of this people that she's saved, basically says, what do we do now? And Wonder Woman says, now you do all you can do. You live. And the girl asks, how? And Wonder Woman says, being free means you may always ask this question. Okay, yep, I'm tracking with you so far. And being free means you will never get the answer. I don't know if that's the case. I would say being free means you'll never get all the answers, not in this life, but you can get some answers on how you ought to live. This plays more into a relativistic view, this sort of moral agnosticism that says, well, none of us can know what is truly moral, what is truly right or wrong. We just kind of do what we want to do. But I think that superhero comics fall apart if you actually believe in moral relativism. Anyway, I can dig into that another time. She says being free means you will never get the answer in terms of like the answer to how should I live. The girl says this is good. And Wonder Woman, I think, admirably, rightly says, no, it is not good. I wish it were different. There should be a way to be in the world that is clear and easy. And man, yeah, there should be. Because of the fall, because of human sin, we are living in a world that is not that way. But it ought to be another way. And I do wish that it was another way. And we have great hope and reason to hope that it will finally and forever be another way, where it will be clear and easy to know how we ought to live, the way we ought to live. So anyway, getting back to Wonder Woman, she says, there should be a way to be in the world that is clear and easy, that you can be taught and followed without doubts or questions. Yeah, I mean, I think that we can be taught, specifically from God's Word, how we ought to live, but I certainly still have a lot of doubts and questions that I'm dealing with day to day. I think there can be an overly simplistic view among some Christians that every question is easily answered, like, okay, well, yeah, I think there's a little more thought required. But now here is where Diana sets herself up as one with privileged, true information. That she has a perspective, and this has happened before. It was a while back, but this has happened before, where Diana, in dialogue with someone, says something about her background, and because of that, she has the true word for the moment. And in this case, she says, "But I have been to the heavens, I have supped with the gods," which certainly sounds like, okay, she has cosmic knowledge that others do not have. She says, "And please believe me, in light of that, this cosmic knowledge that I have that others do not have, when I say, your fate and your faith are yours alone." Now, it depends on what she means by that. We all have to make choices. Our faith should be something that is personally ours, not something that we just take upon ourselves because that's what our parents believed or that's what this person we admire believes or whatever. This is our responsibility to make choices and to make our faith our own if we're going to have faith. But if by saying this she means no one else factors into your fate and your faith cannot and should not be questioned, I think both of those are demonstrably false. She goes on to say, "Make your mistakes, find your way in the dark, then in the light. Be the woman you are, nothing more or nothing less." She says, "Mouseman, who was the evil dictator, Mouseman does not know, and neither do I." Now, in one sense, I appreciate this. It seems noble. No one else should tell us in this commanding way what we should believe. We are all responsible for seeking out the truth ourselves. But does this even leave room for conversations in which we try to persuade each other to hold a different point of view? I think persuasion is extremely important. Here Wonder Woman clearly does. She is trying to persuade this little girl to hold to the truth claims that Wonder Woman herself is making in light of her great and grand cosmic knowledge. But she's saying, if you're going to listen to me about one thing, just listen to this. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to anybody else. Make your mistakes. So go on your own journey. Basically, she sounds like she would want to ignore the book of Proverbs, which pleads with its readers to say, please learn this from me. You're going to go through life the hard way. You're going to run into so much trouble if you don't listen to wisdom. But Wonder Woman seems to be advocating that as the best path. Make your mistakes, find your way in the dark, then in the light. But how about also find people with wisdom? Listen to their perspectives. Consider them, weigh them. It doesn't mean you have to blindly accept them, but look for wisdom from others who have been around longer than you. Be the woman you are, nothing more, nothing less. Sounds like to be yourself, you have to just not take advice, go on your own path without anybody else presenting any views that might contradict your own. Make your mistakes. Yeah. She says, "Mouseman does not know, and neither do I, but you will." Oh, really? Well, why will you? I think we like hearing that somehow we don't need wisdom from outside of ourselves, that we can just go through life and be isolated in our thinking and without seeking counsel from others, and we will arrive at what is the right thing to do. But that is a recipe for disaster. And on top of all that, this is a self-defeating interaction, because if Wonder Woman really believed this, she wouldn't offer any of this wisdom, quote unquote, to this girl. She would just say nothing and walk away. But she doesn't. She clearly believes that she has some wisdom to impart. So, philosophically, some issues that I have here. But I am curious where the book is going to go, because in Wonder Woman 28, they introduce and foreshadow what looks to be a new villain called the Matriarch. that is being portrayed already in a negative light. We as readers, I think, are supposed to view her as a villain, as a threat that Wonder Woman is going to have to face. I'm very interested to see what the treatment of this character will be like, because certainly up to this point in Tom King's run, we've had a lot that's been anti-patriarchy. And I can get on board with that. Men should not just be ruling with this iron fist and women subservient in any and all circumstances. I am not interested in that at all. But are we going to finally acknowledge that, like, hey, the extreme version of feminism that would say women should be in charge, women are superior, women should do all the things to men that men have been wrongly doing to women? Hopefully we're going to see a little balance here. We're going to see, okay, so this character called the matriarch, we're going to see that her way is not right either. But how is her way going to be articulated? How is her way going to be portrayed? What could we potentially glean from that philosophically? I'll be curious, but honestly, guys, on like a pure like fan level, I've lost interest in Tom King's run on Wonder Woman issues ago. I'm just tuning in, like I said, to keep track of any big continuity changes and to see what there is interesting to talk about with you guys. But I think those are all of my thoughts. Well, actually, you know what? Ring selection. The ring selection for this week is the red one, which represents anger, rage. Comic books have not made me anything close to angry in a decade or more than a decade, a long time. But I was like, I'm not quite feeling apathetic, which would just be like the, whatever. And I would wear the black ring for that. For just a flatline response. This, I think, actively with DCKO and Wonder Woman 28, I was at least internally rolling my eyes like, all right, I got to read this, So the closest emotion on the ring spectrum that I could tie that to would be to the red ring of anger. So there you go. And at long last, those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, love getting your thoughts. You can leave those for me in the comments below. If you want this content as a monthly podcast, I take the audio from each of these installments, put it together, release it once a month. It's called the, what is it called? The Essential Issues, a DC Comics podcast. You can get that and a ton more content made for you as we can our christiangeekcentral.com. See, I should have had my script in front of me. christiangeekcentral.com is where you go for all that. Yeah, what? Geek out, seek the truth? Yeah, I butchered this whole thing. Bye. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.